So welcome everybody to the On the Blue Line podcast. This is the interview room. This is where I sit down and talk to guests from all different walks of life, and I bring their story to you. I bring what they're doing to you, primarily because there's something we can learn from everyone, right? They don't have to be in law enforcement. They don't have to have prior military experience. I find that I learn something from people in all different types of life and different walks of life, and I'm able to take that and then relay it back to what I'm doing in law enforcement, which I think is just amazing. So I hope you're enjoying this. It is Thursday. I hope you are having a good week. If you are listening to this on the morning it came out, it's on a Thursday morning. If you are not, then I have no idea what day it is for you. But I hope you are having a good day or a good week, whichever the case may be for you on whatever day you're listening to this. Thank you to those who have been supporting the podcast. For those of you who are leaving us the rating and reviews, that is a big help. It doesn't matter which platform that you are listening on, but if you could leave us those ratings and reviews, subscribe, all that good stuff, I greatly appreciate it. And I will be reading some of those ratings and reviews in future episodes of the Morning Roll Calls that come out on Monday. For those who are watching on video, remember all the podcasts, they are all on video. So you can go to our YouTube channel. It's probably easiest to just go to the website ontheblueline.com, go to the watch tab, and you can see the direct links to all of the videos that are on YouTube. And then those who are watching on video can see that I'm wearing the Resiliency Matters t-shirt. And thank you, those of you who've been supporting the show and buying the Resiliency Matters t-shirts and some of the other shirts and hats. I greatly appreciate it, and it helps us to get the word out. So that's all I have for you on that stuff this week. Let me tell you a little bit about this week's guest. Her name is Shā Sparks. She is an energetic catalyst and fearless communicator who sparks leaders in transition, who are unclear and go from fear to fired up about their life and business. Through her renowned Spark Your Alpha program, Shā's audiences and clients experience more confidence, amplified emotional intelligence, and the spark that ignites their fearless action. As the CEO, Chief Excitement Officer, of Sparks of Fire International, she hosts the Power of Investing in People podcast, is the author of How to Get Your Voice Back, is a certified fearless living coach and trainer, and the co-founder of the hashtag Firestarters book project, which, if you're watching on video, you will see is right up here on my bookshelf. Auntie Shā, to all her friends' kids, she is also an expert dog sitter and a rookie kayaker, but most importantly, Shā wants to inspire others to move confidently through change so they can step into their firepower. Moreover, and more importantly, than what's in this wonderful bio is that Shā's a good friend. And I have wanted to get her on the podcast to just talk a little bit about what she does when it comes to this fearless living coaching. I feel horrible. We actually just recorded the podcast, and I didn't even mention her podcast in that podcast, which is, I don't know what that means, but make sure you go to the show notes and follow hers and check out the Power of Investing in People podcast. But what we do talk about is the great things that she is doing with coaching and the books that she's written. And you're going to get something out of here. I get that, we as law enforcement, especially us guys, we like to, there's a little bit of this alpha thing, and, we like to hear the crazy stories or the some of the humorous stuff that we've had. And this is a more serious conversation. However, it's a very beneficial conversation. And I can tell you, there's few people that have a bigger heart for helping others than Shā does. So without taking any more time, here's this week's guest and my friend, Shā Sparks. Shā, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am excited that you are here. It isn't every week on this show that I get to sit down with a good friend and we get to have a conversation. So that makes this one particularly special.
I agree. And, it's so funny to think about how long we've known each other and watching our each other's journey on our shows. So I'm just excited that you've brought another season back.
Well, thank you. I am glad, and I'm sure the listeners are as well, that it is coming back and is back. So, all right, let me start with my get to know you questions. Even though I know you,
Yeah.
I still have to ask these. So,
Sure.
coffee or tea?
Depends on the day, mostly tea, and then sometimes coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any particular type of coffee? Like, do you have to add milk and sugar, or?
I'm a drink coffee black person. My dad always said they'll put hair on your chest. Not that women need that, but for some reason that was a thing. But I also, on occasion, like, one of those foo-foo venti tall or whatever it's called, chai latte with almond milk
There
with
you go.
extra hot, one shot of espresso, all the things. But
That is,
but that's it. Like every once in a while. I don't have it on a daily basis.
well, it's definitely a dad quote. It's going to put hair on your chest. I mean, that we've all grown up with that one for sure.
Yeah.
So
But like, yeah, like as a little girl, I'm sure that probably wasn't something I needed to do, but yeah.
No, but every dad said it, even probably to his daughter. So
exactly.
So whether it's coffee or tea, where's your favorite place to have that drink?
Sitting at the ocean watching the sunrise.
Figured you might say that.
Yeah.
Easier now
Absolutely.
that you're in the state of Florida.
It is easier now, and it's I don't do it enough. We'll just put it that way. I don't do it enough. But yes, that is my favorite spot.
You and me both. Do you have a best or worst travel story?
Gosh, that's a hard question. Because I get asked what's been your favorite city that you traveled to, and I think all of them. My best travel story. Yeah, so I did a quick weekend up to New York City for Christmas in 2019. And I took the earliest flight I could handle because my friend was already there. And so we were staying in Times Square. So I literally got off the plane and I think it was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And we literally hit the ground running. Well, thank goodness the weather was cooperative. And we went from Times Square all the way down to World Trade Center to the Statue of Liberty, to this ferry over, and then came back. And then we went all the way back up to Central Park and all of that. And then on Christmas, so that was Christmas Eve, on Christmas morning or Christmas evening, we saw the Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall. Very so that cool. Was fantastic. And none of it was planned. It was like, okay, let's just go and do and see what we can do. And then we also, what else did we do? Oh, so Christmas Eve night, we did the Harlem Globetrotters at Madison Square Garden. I'm like, all my little kid dreams were like, yes, I get to do these things in New York City. Yeah, so it was awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know how that one fits into the Christmas spirit, but I was with you up until the Harlem Globetrotters. Still fun to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we did Rockefeller Center and did all of that. It was just awesome. Amazing trip, very fast. And then the next morning I caught a train and went to DC. So it was a whirlwind of a trip, very packed full. And it was awesome. That's probably my favorite trip.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite nonfiction book other than the Bible or maybe a more well-known book like that? But do you have a favorite nonfiction book?
Oh, let's see. Yes, I have two actually. They changed my life. Women Who Love Too Much. And it should really be called People Who Love Too Hard. And the other one is Boundaries.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. I will look up both of those.
Yeah, they both changed my life. So I highly recommend them to everybody.
Well, and that's what's important is life-changing books.
Yes, exactly.
So this last question I have to ask you, because I found on one of your bios, it said, Auntie Shay, to all her friends' kids, she is also an expert dog sitter and a rookie kayaker. So yes. Tell me about one of your kayak experiences.
There hasn't been that many actually. So I bought a foldable kayak that it folds from 3 pieces into one. And I haven't even taken it out, but I've been practicing in the pool in the backyard just to be safe.
And you haven't taken it out in Florida yet?
No, because one, I just haven't found a buddy to go with me. And 2, I don't want to go by myself and, something happened and I drowned or, whatever. Although my brother informs me that most all the rivers here that I could take it to are about 3 feet deep. I wouldn't drown. So I would be fine.
And for the most part, that is accurate. And knowing whereabouts you live and nobody else does, so we'll keep that a secret, but yes. Knowing the whereabouts of where you are, there's actually some really cool trips you can take via kayak at night and
Mm-hmm.
see the
Mm-hmm.
little glowing sea
Yes.
creatures. And I've actually done that, and it's a blast.
Yeah, I want to do that. I just haven't taken the time to do it yet. Yeah.
Well, we'll put that on the list. I guess we all
Yes.
have things we need to get done.
Yes, for sure.
So tell us a little bit about your story. Maybe just kind of introduce, you know, because you grew up in the Midwest
Yes.
and you're now in the beautiful state of Florida.
Yes.
So maybe just give us a little bit of your journey.
Oh gosh, a little bit. The 30-second journey. Let's see. So I grew up on a farm in the middle of Iowa. I moved to Kansas City, the big city, quote unquote, um, when I was 19. And then I went to cosmetology school and built a career for 29 years and had most of my clients that I had built up for 24 years. I was in the top of my game in every salon that I worked at. I mean, before that, I had worked someplace for like 6 months and they were already asking me to be manager or whatever, somehow be a lead in that role. And then I went on my own. And the funny thing was, is I went on my own, and then the owner of the last salon that I was at, they asked me to come back and be a partner, and I was able to turn them down. Um, but it was after much discussion about it, like what they were actually looking for, and what they were really looking for was um, my clientele. And
Right.
they weren't really wanting me and my leadership ability. They were just wanting the clientele that I had taken. And so now I then was during that time frame, at some point I was in an abusive relationship. And when I got out of that, I started to peel away the layers of the onion that I am, that we all are, and started to heal. And as I started to heal, I started to share the lessons that I was learning about myself with my clients, my hair clients, in hopes that maybe something would, inspire them. And it did. And they would come back, go away for 4 to 6 weeks, come back and say, oh my gosh, what you told me about being, I'll give you an example. So one of the things they would say is, so I would always ask, so what's new? Tell me what's going on. What's been happening since we last saw each other. And they would say, oh, this thing at work, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, what about you? And I'm like, oh, well, I learned that I was emotionally unavailable. I mean, how exciting is that? Right. And they're like, oh, first of all, that's weird, Shay. And then second of all, what does that actually mean? And I'm like, well, what it means is that I'm afraid to actually be open and honest and share what I'm really feeling and thinking and say what I mean and mean what I say.
Yeah.
And they were like, what? And I'm like, yeah. So when you're having anxiety or you're anxious or you're nervous or someone, about a situation, do you share that with the other person? And they're like, no, never. Why would I? And I'm like, right. That's being emotionally unavailable. We're not taught how to do this. So once I started to become vulnerable, which is a word that I couldn't even pronounce at the time, I started to shift not only myself, but I started to shift my clients started to shift, because then they went and practiced it too, practice being vulnerable. And then I was really put it into practice, and I started to change the conversations I had with my father. And up until then, we had just a surface relationship. And there were even years, many years in my teens and in my 20s, years where we didn't even speak. And so now at this point, I just started to share certain things and ask him certain questions. And for an example, he would ask me to do something, and I would say, are you truly asking me to do something, or are you trying to manipulate me into doing it? And
Yeah.
he was like, what? Like he couldn't pronounce the word manipulation, like I couldn't pronounce vulnerable. And I said, Dad, it sounds like you want me to do this, but then there's this little like twinge of, you're going to be really mad at me if I don't do it. So actually, it feels like you're trying to guilt me into doing it rather than just asking me to do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, huh, I'd never thought about it like that before. And I wasn't blaming him or shaming him or, being or pointing fingers at him going, how dare you do this? I was just asking. And once I started to shift the way that I spoke to him, he started to change and he became my best friend in the last 5 years of his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that's so powerful. It's something you just mentioned there, and it's funny because those in last week's episode, from when the listeners are going to be hearing this one, that word that came up with the guest we just had, which is vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting word, especially when you're talking law enforcement officers, because you've got a career where you have a lot of alpha type personalities, males and females, but they're very alpha, they're here to help everybody else solve their problems. In fact, that's literally the job. It's serving others.
Mm-hmm.
And yet in that, they don't tend to ever want to focus on the problems they have or even verbalize those issues that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you see? I mean, obviously you see it in the broader public, but what is the first step towards that when we talk about vulnerability? Is it just as simple as opening up and just talking, or is there a little bit more to it? Is there more like a recognition that's
Yes, the answer is yes to both
okay?
questions. So I work with a lot of veterans and some first responders, but mostly it's in the veteran world. And so, yeah, they're that same type of personality, right? Alpha, they have this tough exterior, and everybody has, everybody in the world technically has that. It's at what degree are you willing to be transparent? So if we take the word vulnerable off the table and not have it such a taboo word and talk about being transparent and self-aware, then it becomes a different conversation. And first of all, you hit the nail on the head when you said recognize. We have to first recognize what it is that we're thinking. And most of the time, we don't recognize what we're thinking because we're on autopilot. And as humans, we're never taught any of these skills, but as humans, we're always thinking or feeling that that is what we should trust because it's a thought or it's a feeling. So I need to trust that. And the truth is that neither one are true, which is a really profound concept to understand. You're like, wait, what? Just because I thought that, that's not true.
Right.
So sometimes when we share our thoughts and our feelings to someone, especially in a leadership role, we are afraid that that other person will perceive us as weak or stupid or incompetent. And so then when we perceive that, then we kind of shy away. We pull back, we put up that exterior over more. We do what I call overthinking. Some people call it, oh, I'm analyzing, but then that's cute. It's really
Yes.
overthinking or
I,
procrastinating.
I like to analyze, you know that. But anyway, go on.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. So perfect example, like analyzing. So give yourself a time frame. Like I'm going to analyze this data for, 24 hours. And then overthinking starts after that 24 hours, right? Overthinking is when you can't make a decision.
Wow.
So that's when it becomes from analyzing to overthinking. And that's how fear is showing up because now you're actually fearful of making that decision because now you can be, because you're in that realm of thinking about being weak or incompetent. Now it goes even deeper of, well, I could be unlovable. I could be insignificant. I could be worthless. And I don't want that to happen. So
Yeah.
I'm going to think some more. And really, what it is it's just not willing to make a decision. So when you start holding your thoughts captive and really understanding what it is that you're thinking, then you can kind of see, okay, so how are these thoughts making me feel? Now, here is the dynamic of how things happen in our lives. A circumstance happens, we have a thought about it, that thought leads to a feeling, the feeling drives our action, and then that action gets us results.
Okay.
Okay? So when we have results and they're not the desired outcome that we wanted, most of the time we go back to the thought, oh, it's my fault. Something I did wasn't right.
Right.
So it's kind of like a fixed mindset, to quote the growth mindset book, which is also a really great book, Mindset. and it's on fixed or growth. And a fixed mindset talks about, well, it's my fault. And growth mindset thinks about, what do I need to learn? So it's not, I failed because I'm a bad person or I'm a failure. It's, okay, I need to learn more. What do I need to study? What do I need to figure out?
I like that.
So I always like to start with the first question that I started with when I started on my healing journey. And it just literally falls into place for so many things in all areas of life. And that question is, what is it that I don't know that I need to know in order to move forward? Because we know what we know, and then there's a whole lot of things out there that we don't know. And
Right.
most of the time we don't even know that we don't know them. And I know
I
that
love
sounds
that.
confusing, but listen to it, repeat it if you have to, because it makes so much sense. Because there's the things that we know, and then there's the things that we don't know. And there's a whole lot of things that we don't know that we don't know.
Absolutely.
So when you go back to this thought, sorry, I'm going to keep going. When we go back
Please,
to this
please.
thought, then that is where you begin changing your mindset. Then the feelings will start to change about what you're doing. Then that will drive that action. And then that action will start to get closer to the desired outcome of the results that you're wanting. It might not be exact, but it's starting to get a little bit closer, and it gets a little bit more, a little bit more. I know you love this phrase, out of your comfort zone. And to that
I
more
don't
desired
like being out of my comfort zone, just for the record, but go on.
out, a little bit more out of that comfort zone and into the more desired outcome results that you're wanting. But it all starts with that mindset.
I love that. In some ways, it reframes what I was thinking of as you were talking. So Andy Andrews has that quote where he says, "Your best thinking is what got you here." And I am often reminded of that myself, especially when things seem to be crumbling apart. And it's like, okay, my best thinking got me exactly here, which is not exactly where I want to be.
Right. Right.
But I love what you're saying, because it really, at first, I thought it may be contrasted what he's saying, but it really doesn't.
No, no.
They actually dovetails beautifully, because it becomes an educational issue rather than a personal issue.
Yes. Yes. So what you're doing is you're separating it from exactly what you said. You're separating it from yourself as ownership and responsibility. I am responsible 100% for this. You are, and it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
It's about what you don't know. It's about what you need to learn now. Who do you need to contact? Maybe it's a conversation you need to have. Maybe it's a person that you need to ask for support with, a mentor, a coach, a counselor. There's so many different options, and it's more of an open thought process rather than a closed process or fixed and just being focused on, well, I didn't do it. I screwed it up. I'm a failure. I'm this, and all the negative inner voice that we have.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. In fact, I'm getting a little bit ahead of my notes, but I was going to ask you about this whole thing when it comes to negative self-talk. In your book,
Yes, you
How
have
to
it.
Get Your Voice Back,
Yes.
6 steps to build up your confidence when negativity takes you down. You make a statement in there that we wouldn't say these things to our best friends. So why do we say it to ourselves? And in that sentence, you're talking about internalizing the things that we
Yes.
say to ourselves that we would never say to, you even say our best friends, but sometimes we wouldn't even say them to our enemy. It's just, we tend to
Right.
be harder on ourselves. And I think it kind of goes right in hand with what you're talking about here, that one of the things we've got to be careful of is this negative self-talk. And I know this is a show for cops, and they're probably thinking, oh, you're gonna a little foo-foo or whatever, but I know that I do this. So if I do this, then I know you, the listeners, do it. And so since you're by yourself walking or in your car and no one else is around, we can have a vulnerable moment, if you would. And we can, I know I struggle with this. So my question for you, Shay, is when it comes to this negative self-talk, is that kind of what we're talking about here? Is this is how we redirect?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the thing. Let's just say that everyone in the world has a bad day, right? Because they do,
We all do.
right? And unfortunately, the police officers have law enforcement has a job that can lead to life or death or a major issue. a major challenge if you have a bad day,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So if you have a bad day and something bad goes really wrong, one of the things that people tend to do is continue to have a bad day internally. And that's that inner negative self-talk is, oh my God, I can't believe I'm so stupid. I'm so incompetent. I'm so ignorant. I'm so whatever. You tell yourself
Yeah.
that you're not enough, that I did this. I made the wrong move. I'm so dumb. Whatever the unfortunate situation was as the outcome, sometimes, and most of the time, especially the stronger we are, the more we internalize, and we're literally bullying ourselves,
Yeah.
beating ourselves up. So that's where that inner negative self-talk it comes from. So it's just being aware, first of all, and recognizing it. What is it that you actually say to yourself? Because it's brutal. Let me tell you, it is brutal. And not only would you not say it to your best friend, you wouldn't say that to yourself as a child, right?
Interesting.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't say that to a child if you're a normal human typical being, right? You wouldn't say that
Right.
to a child.
Yeah.
And yet inside we're all children just trying to get our needs met, and here we are literally bombarding ourselves with this inner negative talk all day, every day, all day long.
Wow. I, that is very powerful. Let me kind of direct it a different direction real quick here, just so people kind of know where you're coming from and what you do. So you are a fearless living coach. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I love that phrase, fearless living. And it kind of goes well with everything we're discussing here, because that's really what we're overcoming is fear. But let me ask you, how has fear stopped you in the past? Let's kind of start
Oh
there and
yeah.
then we'll go forward.
Oh yeah. I mean, so well, first of all, fear stopped me from moving. Fear stopped me from moving out of my job, moving out of my abusive partner's home. It stopped me from moving out of the state. So in all areas of my life, it's literally stopped me. I feel like most of the time between the ages of 8 and 12, something happens in our life. And that's when the fear gets kind of ignited, so to speak. And then from there, our childhood experiences shape our adult decisions. So the decisions that we're making today as an adult stems from something that happened to us from childhood that creates this fear that we just keep carrying along with us.
Yeah.
So for me, I've been afraid of God, so many things. I was afraid to speak up. I was, believe it or not,
I was going to say, for those that know you personally, that was a shocking statement. So sorry if you saw me laugh there on the camera, people, but I believe you.
Yeah, I mean, so I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to speak out. I was afraid to ask for what I needed. I was afraid to say that I needed something.
Yeah.
That right there was huge for me. I thought, oh, I don't have needs. I don't want to be needy. And the truth is, we all have needs. It's just who we are. We're human, so we all have needs. But in never in a million years would you have ever gotten me to say that I had needs. And so when I was able to let that go of having needs doesn't mean I'm needy. It means they just haven't been met.
Wow.
And I haven't communicated them or asked for them to be met. That is the key. So yeah, I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to use my voice. I was afraid to, at one point when I was in that abusive relationship, I was afraid he was going to kill me.
Wow.
So I was just waiting to die for that whole relationship.
It's horrible.
And then I realized that for most of my life, I was afraid to live because I knew that in my, sorry, Wayne, in my comfort zone, I knew that I was safe and protected and I was at least okay ish, or at least I was surviving. I didn't understand that there was a difference between surviving and thriving. So I was afraid to survive, thrive, because I didn't know what that looked like. It was so unfamiliar. Even the concept was so unfamiliar. I thought there's no way I can learn how to thrive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was afraid of many things.
And I'm assuming, because I know even as you talk, that it's funny, not funny, haha, but funny, interesting. Some of the things that you said there, because it kind of takes me back. And one thing that I've been doing lately, as you know, is I've been working on another book that I'm hoping to have come out later this fall or next year. And part of that, thank you.
Yay. Yes.
It's a slow process, as is everything with
Yes.
what we're doing, but you know that.
Yes.
But in there, it's kind of split up into these individual, like every day is a different theme. So it's been a lot of self excavation for me, because I'm
Mm-hmm.
going back to these moments. And it's interesting, um, because it's never, at least in my opinion, it's never an excuse, just because I went through this as a child or whatever. That's never an excuse, but it can be a reason. It can be a contributing
Right.
factor, if you would.
Right.
So going back and looking at some of these things that had happened, and how I kind of, that is the reason why I struggled with X now. Like I didn't, whatever it is, public speaking or talk, you see this pattern all throughout your life. And it also can become a decision-making pattern or a
Mm-hmm.
decision-making paradigm that can, at some point, you wake up and you're like, why do I keep doing the same dang thing over and over and over again? So we all have these fears. So my point being is, I think this is all universal.
Mm-hmm.
Since it is universal, what is that first step to overcoming it? What would you say is the first step towards overcoming fear?
Well, first of all, I think the first step is to understand that you're not alone, and you don't have to do this alone. Um, in fact, I recommend that you don't do this alone. So possibly find a trusted confidant or person that you can vent to. And a difference of a venting rather than counseling is that their whole purpose as the listener is to just listen, not to justify, not to validate, not to agree with, just to listen. So I would think, I mean, I'm a big believer in, of course, hiring coaches and counselors and journaling and things like that. But literally, if you could find someone that you trust, venting is a huge tool that is underutilized. Journaling is another one. So if you don't want to verbalize it and you're not ready to start verbalizing it to another person because you're too afraid, because again, I was there, journal it, write it down, get it out of your brain. And I write it down with a pen and a paper, or a pencil and paper, the old school way, and not at a laptop or your phone, because there's research in your brain that things get, the neuroplasticity gets rewired, and it helps you release it down into your shoulder, down your arm, down into your hand, through the pen and onto the paper. So it allows you to actually, like, kind of, I call it a brain dump. You actually get to take out the garbage, so to speak, and get rid of some of that things so you can have space.
Yeah.
Because that's what ends up happening, is that we have all of this, let's pretend it's all negativity going in our minds 24/7, that you can't even see that there are things that are to be thankful for. There are things that are going great that you can't even see it.
Yeah.
You are so muddled with all the things that's happening, negativity, that's all, and then that's all you see. So you really start to focus on your choice of either it's negative, or you can start to focus on things that are positive. So I would say a combination that would be kind of maybe 1, 2, and 3 is journal, vent, and then choose which one you want to focus on.
Every time I either say journaling or someone says journaling on here, I feel like there's this pushback with, well, that sounds great. And, it always comes down to an issue with time. Well, I don't have time to do that. So
Yeah.
what is your journaling practice? Or can you go into that a little bit? Because I think a lot of people envision that they have to sit down for a half hour or an hour, that they're
Yeah.
writing, at War and Peace. And that's not what we're doing here. Can you go into a little bit more on what that practice is for you?
Absolutely. And there, thank you for bringing up my book, How to Get Your Voice Back. There was one chapter in there, one exercise, and that's what it is. It's a prompt journal. And one of the exercises is notice what you're saying to yourself. What negative thoughts are you calling yourself? And take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and just write it out, what you're saying to yourself. I mean, literally, you're going to be shocked that you are saying this to yourself because you had never actually identified it.
Yeah. I, that type practice, and the reason I ask these questions when guests come on here, and thank you for saying that, is because they've been powerful for me. But
Mm-hmm.
I know the listeners, when they hear me saying it over and over again, it becomes kind of one of those, well, it works for you, but it may not work for me. And that's why I love hearing it from others who it's worked for. In fact, for me, it's even been healing in other areas, like with forgiveness towards people or
Oh, yeah.
different things like that, especially when you talk familial type issues or that kind of thing. Writing that down, one of the best exercises I had ever gone through along those lines was at a men's retreat in the mountains of Colorado. That's part of why it was so perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But besides the fact that we were in the mountains of Colorado, it was this, it had to do with your father and your relationship with your father. And
Sure.
my dad and I had a good relationship, but there's always, there's always things with fathers and sons, as there is with fathers and daughters,
Mm-hmm.
as there is with mothers and sons and mothers and daughters. It's just the
Yeah.
way it goes. And part of the exercise was write down what it is you wish your father would have always told you. And it became kind of a
Yes.
forgiveness exercise. And the power of that,
Yes.
I cannot say enough. So I thank you. I just think that's such a powerful message when it comes to writing.
Well, and it's so undervalued, and it's funny. So I wrote that book, and I literally was at my class reunion and saw my English teacher who started us writing, journaling every day in middle school. And I hated it. And I wrote some really terrible things to him as a letter telling him how much I hated it, because that's the kind of person I was as a troublemaker. And
I can't
so
imagine.
I know, surprise, surprise. And so it's funny because then I got to just see him recently. And I said, honestly, as much as I hated it, thank you, because it's literally been the catalyst for who I am and for my books and partly therapy.
Yeah.
And you vent instead of a person, you're venting onto paper.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a huge tool.
I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, let me go one other direction here, real quick. We've talked about fear and we've talked about kind of those first steps to overcoming fear. But then something that comes up, and I liked this question because it kind of is nuanced towards something that's very important for law enforcement officers. So, how does someone build confidence? So, if the opposite or the way that you're going to face fear is being more confident, and confidence is something that's very important for a law enforcement officer, and then sometimes it's faked, which we'll get to that in a minute. But when it comes to overcoming fear, how does someone build their confidence?
Mm. So funny. I actually asked myself this question way back when I was in the healing process. And I thought, how can I build up my confidence in who I am? And you're going to laugh at the answer because we've already been speaking about it. It is literally practicing being vulnerable.
I like that.
And and it's two parts, right? That's the first part. The safety zone in doing this is to know you're not going to die being vulnerable. It might feel like it
Yeah.
because it's so scary and so out of your comfort zone, but you're not going to. All you are is going to have a vulnerable conversation with someone. And, or you're going to be the new person in the room and raising your hand and say, I'm new here. But it could
Which is
also
not
be,
easy for some of us, just for the record, but
yeah.
go on.
And it wasn't for me. And I started going to networking events and doing that and just practicing it. And it was amazing how people who are receive you when you're being vulnerable is not shunning you. They actually open their arms to you and it was like, oh, you're new. Great. Let me talk to you. And so yeah, it's fascinating to the fear will tell us, oh, I can't do that. And then once you do it, the confidence, you literally, that's how confidence grows, is by being vulnerable, by continuously to practice being vulnerable
I love that.
in a safe way.
I think that's so important. I think that's something the listeners can take away from this, no matter what their walk of life, whether in law enforcement or something else. As you know, because you know me personally, it's something that I struggle with even now, getting out of my comfort zone and doing things that make me uncomfortable. However, even doing this podcast and any public speaking I've done have all been very much in this vein. I just didn't know what words to put to it. When I
Mm,
first wanted to get into doing public speaking, I intentionally made myself vulnerable by going to different classes and going through classes that I knew they were going to force me to get up and talk
mm-hmm.
and those kind of things. And that definitely helped build that base and made it much more comfortable going down the road. And is part of why I do it now. Cause it is funny. You and I've talked about this, and I just posted about it this week on social media, how for some reason, these speaking and podcasting, half times it's all introverts that come to do this, which is absolutely hilarious. But
Yeah, it is, because they're, yeah, they're at safety behind the screen too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing people don't get. It's like, well, you can sit here and talk for hours. How are you an introvert? But I'm literally talking to a computer, and I know that I can edit it. Like I control it all.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's a little different than standing up in front of 1,000 people and being like, hi, I'm Wayne.
Yes. Yeah. So being vulnerable is like taking an improv class, right?
Yeah.
Like that may be super vulnerable. Taking a professional development, a profession personal development. Personal development is actually professional development and vice versa. If you learn something in an area of any walk of life, it applies to all areas. Number one. But you could also just have a conversation with a trusted person by saying, thank you, and then tell them what you're thankful for them for, telling them you're sorry, and then explaining why you're sorry, saying, I love you for the first time, asking for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Those things are being vulnerable. And emotional fear is what we've been talking about, but it shows up in the brain, and you have the same reactions as your in your body as physical fear. So, going out on the beat for the first time, shooting someone for the first time, or holding a gun to someone. There's literally all this fear is the same, whether it's emotional fear or physical fear. A spider, some people are scared of spiders or snakes or heights. That's the same thing. It all shows up, whether it's you're practicing being vulnerable by telling someone that you're sorry, or you pet a tarantula.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's literally all the same.
Hmm. Yeah. And I know that to be intuitively true, but I've never actually thought of that before. Because this will surprise you, but there were a lot of things that I was a little uncomfortable with, say heights, and yeah. But fortunately, I had a little sister who decided that she was afraid of absolutely nothing. So hence, I had to do some things, because you can never let your little sister out, do you? But anyway, we're not going to give the listeners any more than that in this conversation. One last thing that I kind of want to go down. So we've talked about fear, and we talked about
Yes.
overcoming, and we've talked about it from an emotional side, as well as what you had just brought up. And then we kind of went into how to build confidence. What is imposter syndrome, and how does that tend to stop people?
So imposter syndrome is basically anything that you say, I am not enough. Or you say, I am stupid, I am weak, I can't believe I'm so like this was one of the things I used to say all the time to myself. I can't believe I'm so stupid that I blank. You might say, I can't believe I'm so dumb. Or you say, I could never do that, whatever that is, because I'm not blank enough, smart enough, rich enough, handsome enough, pretty enough, whatever
Yeah.
the blank enough is. That's imposter syndrome. And all 9 times out of 10, and I'm making that up, but most of the time, it stops you from whatever it is that you're wanting to do. That imposter syndrome will show up. The key is to just know that it's going to show up, kind of like that goes back to that thoughts drives the feelings, that drives the result, the actions that you want, the results for the desired outcome. It's just going to show up. And then you go, okay, I don't have to listen to that because it's not true.
I like that.
So if none of our thoughts are true, then we get a choice to what we want to think.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
true. No, and that's again powerful and something that I can see how we tend to do that. Because even myself, that's something that I've seen within myself that I've had to deal with. And I think that's it's something we all do at one point or another. And I know, in fact, just today, I had a conversation with someone like, well, I could never do what you're doing. And it's like, well, you could, you just have to do it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there wasn't a legitimate reason why they couldn't. It was just, well, um, and it could be as simple as, well, I don't want to do this and this is what it takes to do it. I get that.
Yeah.
But we make these internal agreements with ourselves that so often are true,
Yes.
but then they can stifle us and keep us from doing what it is we were called to do or should be doing or whatever the case may be.
Right. Like I could never be an astronaut. And they would say, oh, sure, you can. No, really, I don't want to train like that. Right. Like, so
Right.
there's my no, I don't want to type of thing. Right.
Yeah.
So I get to make a decision. I get to reframe the thought. It's not that I'm thinking, oh, I'm too dumb to become an astronaut or
Right.
I'm too dumb to be X, Y, or Z, like what you were saying. So it's really about holding your thoughts captive. It all comes back to that.
I love that. And I like how we've talked a lot about the internal dialogue, because I think that's something I know that it's huge for me and something that I'm constantly needing to battle. So I know for the listeners that that's going to be very beneficial. So I hope you all are enjoying that. Well, Shay, let's quickly, we've already talked about this book,
Yes.
How to Get Your Voice Back. So what is your other book? You also have Fire Starters.
Yes. It's called #Firestarters. And the
Can you
first
tell us a
one,
little bit about that?
yes, it's a co-author book, and the first one is called "How to Be a Spark of Hope in the Midst of Change." And
Love
there
that
are,
title.
thank you, there are more collections coming, and what you'll find is chapters written from people from all walks of life. There are at least two chief master sergeants from the Air Force in the book, and they've shared their experience. There is a trauma coach, a life coach, a marketing coach, and well, I guess he's a life. Gosh, there's several life coaches now that I'm thinking about it, but one is also a naval. He was on a submarine. He's a naval veteran, and it's fascinating that when the pandemic happened, this kind of idea kind of came out of it, that we're no longer meeting in person at the time, connecting with people who are also people who are practicing being the change that they want to see.
Right.
So it's like, well, what if instead of being able to connect in person, what if we connected inside a book? And then we were able to share it with just a larger audience rather than just the people in the room. So that's really kind of where the idea came from. And now it's grown. So we're getting ready to interview applicants for the next collection, which will be called How to Be Fearless. So funny, we're talking about fear. How to be fearless in pursuit of what sets your soul on fire.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's going to be
So
great.
yeah. So if anybody is listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of that, feel free to reach out and we can definitely set you up an interview to talk about what you want to write about.
Perfect. I will make sure to have that in the show notes. And for what the #Firestars book looks like, anyone watching on video, it's right there behind Teddy Roosevelt. But I will also put pictures in here so you'll be able to see that as well. Well, I'm down to what is next for you and your mission?
I love this. I have a couple of avenues that are showing up. One is that I just absolutely am passionate about, as are you, because we have this platform of what's called a podcast. And I love helping small business owners who are professional in their world, like the leader,
Yeah.
really bring their voice to their audience or a broader audience and start a podcast for them. So I interview them and really highlight the amazingness that they do, that they just see with their patients or their clients every day, and really bring that out in conversation. And then, help produce it and help them move forward in being a podcaster.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, and I have to say, for the sake of the listener, Shā is such a cool person. And of course, I'll have the little blurb at the beginning of this, but you are a master connector. You're you're just an amazing person. So everybody definitely check out the website. It's shasparks.com, but definitely reach out to her and follow her on all the social medias. Before you leave, I have to ask you my final question that I ask everybody, though. So we've talked about all sorts of good things and all sorts of takeaways. However, what is the one takeaway, the one thing that law enforcement officers can do that will make a difference in their personal lives? What is that one actionable thing they can take away with them right now?
And hold their thoughts captive and know that the negative isn't true.
I like it.
That's it. So the thought that they think someone else is thinking about them isn't true either.
I love that. It's simple and yet it's profound. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And I'm so glad that you're coming back to do the work that you're doing, because you're making an impact and it's so important.
Well, thank you, Shā. I appreciate it. So everybody go to shasparks.com. All the links are below in the show notes. Shā, thank you again.
Thank you.
And that does it for this week's The Interview Room. I hope you really enjoyed it. Another great guest will be with us again next week. We have a great lineup for you here over the next few weeks and on through the rest of the year. So you're definitely not going to want to miss a single episode. We also have Morning Roll Call, which typically comes out on Monday mornings. However, I may change my mind, and who knows? It could come out a different day of the week. But Morning Roll Call, check that out as well. That's just me talking to you, and it gives us a few minutes to go over something, anything from news or something actionable that matters, hopefully, to you. One last favor, please, 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 whatever service you are looking at or whatever service you are watching this on, you're listening to this on, please leave us a rating and review. 5 stars, that would be the appropriate number of stars. If for some reason it's not 5 stars in your opinion, or if it is, tell us why. We would love to hear it. I would love to get your feedback. In fact, I'm going to start reading some of these reviews on the air. I've been looking at some of the ones on Apple Podcast, and thank you for the phenomenal reviews. And thank you all for taking the time to listen to this. I hope you're really enjoying it. You all have a safe week out there, and I will see you next week in the interview room. I will see you next week in Morning Roll Call, but in the meantime, I'll see you on the blue line.